Hello, this is Basar. In this tutorial, we are going to implement pagination in Spring Boot. As usual, you can find the codes in my GitHub repository. Again, we will clone this repo, and we have these branches, main and the final branch is containing the codes. We are doing this in this tutorial. So let's clone the project, running git clone here, and opening this folder in Visual Studio Code. Let's check the POM.xml. And again, we are running Spring Boot 2.3.4 and running Java version 11. And we have the dependencies of Spring Data JPA, Spring Web, and we have this in-memory database H2. And the other two dependencies are for the development, DevTools, and the Lombok. And in our source, we have this package of user. We have this user entity. It has these fields. We have this user controller, user service, which are not implemented yet. And we have this user repository. So let's start with implementing a get mapping for listing all the users. So in this user controller, let's add the REST controller annotation. And we will have a get mapping here. Our get requests will be handled here. And our path will be API 10 users. This endpoint will be listing all the users. And we are going to return back the list of users. Let's say the method name is get users. And we will ask user service to get the users for us. So let's inject it right here. This auto-wired. And we will call user service get users function. This is not created yet, but it is going to be returning back the list of users, so we can just return the result coming from this function. And let's create this in the user service. And this is going to be a service class. And we are going to get the users from database, so we use the user repository. We are injecting it right here. And user repository is basically just an interface extending the JPA repository, and it is coming with the default functions like the getting users by ID or getting all users. So we are going to use this user repository. And here we have this findAll method, which is returning back the list of users. So we are going to just call this one, saving all these changes and running the application. So the application is started. Now we are going to send our request with Postman. We will send the get request to this user's endpoint. Let's send this request. And here we are receiving a 200 OK, having an empty array. Now let's add users to our application, and we will do it by creating our command line runner instance. Here in this main class we can do that. Here we are going to create a command line runner. Let's call this method as run. And to make this instance to be part of the Spring context, we are going to add the bean annotation right here. So Spring will be calling this function, this run method, and in the end it's going to be returning back this command line runner. And when Spring sees an implementation of command line runner, it is going to be running the code in it. So we are going to return a new command line runner, and this is an interface. We are going to implement the method of this run method, and in this method we are going to add users to our application. We can create multiple users by going with the traditional for loop, or we can use int stream, and we can range from, let's say, 1 to 30. For each of them we will get the iterated number, and in this method we are going to create a user. So this user will have a username, and let's say it is user and the index, and it will have the email. Again, it is going to be something like this, user index at mail.com, and we can set the password like this. And then we are going to save each of these users to the database, so we need user repository to be injected right here. So when Spring is running this function, it is going to be providing us the user repository, and in the end we are going to be returning an instance of this command line runner, and in this method we are going to create 30 users. So here we will call user repository save with the user instance. So that's it. And alternatively, we can convert this implementation to Lambda function like this. So saving this one and going back to Postman and sending a request once again, and here we are seeing the users. Here we have all the users listed here. Now let's think about like this. We have like thousands of users. Let's try it again. And here we have this amount of payload, and the users are listed right here. And as you can guess, in applications like the Twitter or the others, there are billions of users. So if we would have an endpoint like this, we cannot be providing the content in an array. We must be providing the content by pagination. So user must be navigating page by page to browse the content. Now let's change this user count to 30 once again, and we will be implementing the pagination, and this amount of users are enough to demonstrate how we can navigate between pages. So the request must be having data about the page and size. Like we must be providing the request parameters. Like let's say we would be setting the page size and page number like this. We want each page to have 10 items, and we want to start from the first page, the indexed 0. So we would be sending requests like that, and we would be receiving the response accordingly. For now, if we send it like this, nothing changes. We are still receiving all the users listed in this array. Now let's implement this functionality on our controller. So we will take page size and page number. So here in this user controller, we are going to get the request parameters via this request param annotation. And the values are this page size, which is integer, and the other one is page number, and that's also an integer. So we will get an integer of page size. This name is identical with this parameter right here. And the other one is again request param integer page number. Then we will pass these values like this page number and page size to this getUsers method in user service. Let's add these parameters. Now we are going to use these parameters in our query, but first let's check what are the alternatives provided through this user repository. Here we have this user repository is having findAll methods which are taking different parameters, like this one is taking an example object, this one is taking a pageable, and this is returning back us the page response. So this is what we are looking for. So we will call this findAll. Now we need to provide a pageable object to it, and we can create an instance right here, pageable, and that is the instance coming from this one, Spring Framework data domain pageable. And let's say this is page, and we will create a pageable instance with this page request, and this has this of factory method, and we will pass the page number and page size. So this is going to be page number, and the next one is page size. So we have this pageable instance, and we will pass it to this one, and this is returning back the page object, so we don't need this findAll anymore. And since this is returning page, we need to update our method return type right here. We have to return a page back, and since we updated this method return type, we have to update this controller part also. So this is going to be returning back a page object. Now let's save these changes and sending request again with Postman. Now we have a different response. This is an object, and we have this content array, and we have information about the total elements, how many pages are there, and what is the size of the current page, like that. And in the content we have these users from 1 to 10. So we limited our response to receive just 10 users, and we can play with these numbers. Like we can say we want 3 users to be existed in each response, and here we have 3 users, and we can navigate the next page by increasing this page number, and we got the user 4, 5, 6, and if you go like this, we will be getting the other users. Our parameters are limiting the result that we are looking for, and on the other hand, the Spring data is handling the remaining calculations, like how many pages are there, like the total page count, and what is the current page, if we are on the last page or first page, generated by Spring data. But now we are passing the user inputs, like this one, the page size and the page number, into our query. So we have to make sure these values are valid and in the limits. So let's start with this one. Let's say if user does not send this page number at all, what happens? So here we are receiving this bad request. This is saying the missing servlet request parameter exception. This is thrown because this page number is not present in the request. So we can fix it like this. We can say the page number, we can use this request param configurations, and we can say this is not required by setting it to false. And also we can add the other option. If there is no this page number, then let's assign a default value to it, and this default value parameter is looking for a string value, but the page number is integer, so we will provide the, let's say, by default the page number will be 0. So we pass the default value as 0, but it's going to be in this string format. So let's save this one. And let's send the request again. And here we are seeing the request is properly handled. But the existence of the parameter is not the only control point. A user may be entering values like invalid values, which is lower than 0. So maybe user is requesting a value of -3, page number -3. And this is also triggering the exception. And also we have the potential, let's say we might have the millions of users and the user may be setting the page size as 1,000,000. So our pagination would be meaningless for that case. So we have to validate these parameters and we have to set some boundaries for them before running our query in the database. So for solution, instead of processing these parameters like this way, we can use Spring functionality and we can tell Spring that provide us the Pageable. So Spring is going to be taking those request parameters and it is going to do the necessary validations in those values, and it would be handling the default values of those parameters for us, and in the end we would be receiving just the proper page request object in our controller, and we can pass it to our service method, and in that service method we can change this one to take Pageable, and we no longer need to create our own page instance. So let's save all these changes. Now let's go back to Postman. Let's send a valid request first. So we are sending a request of having page size 3, page number as 0. But when we check the content length here, we have 20 users. So it is not caring what we are setting right here. And if we change the page number, again, it is not going to the next page. Because this page size and the page number are our custom request parameter names, and we can make these parameter names to be working with Spring's this Pageable object by setting the configuration parameters. We have this Spring data web Pageable, and we have this page parameter, and for this one we can set it to page number, and we have the other web Pageable size parameter, and for this one we can say page size. So saving this one and sending the request once again, and here we are in page 1. It is starting from user 4, 5 and 6, so the page is limited to 3 users, and we have total 10 pages, so this is properly working. And if we go like the negative numbers, it is properly working. It is assuming the page is 0 by default if it is not a valid entry, or if we say the page size is like this, -3, it is assuming the page size is 20 and returns the 20 users. And again, it has the upper limits. Let's say we want 1,000,000 users to be returned in the response. So we don't have that much user in our application, but here in this part we see the size is limited to 2000. So even we would be requesting this much for the page size, in the end we would be getting only 2000 items in the response. And this Pageable is not only supporting this page and size parameters, but also it has sort parameters too. Let's change this to, let's say, 3 back, and we can add the sort, and the sort is taking 2 values. One of them is the which field we are going to sort, and it is, let's say, we will sort the result based on the ID, and adding a comma, and this second parameter is the order, direction of this sort. And for the direction, currently it is ascending from lower value to higher, but we want, let's say, in reverse order, so we set descending desk. Sending the request again, and here we have this is the first page, the first user 30, 29, 28, and if we go to the next page, we get 27, and it's going in descending order. So this Pageable is providing more capability than we were trying to achieve with our custom implementation. And also by default, this page and size has default values. So if we go to this properties class, we can see here by default this page parameter is page, size parameter is size. So we can just get rid of these custom values, and we can convert this to, let's say this was size and this is page, and sending the request, and here it is working again. In properties, we can override the default values. Like in this properties, we have this page size, and we can set the index, the page index, to be starting from 1 instead of 0 by setting this 1 index parameters to true. So currently, if we want to go to the first page, we set the page as 0. But if you don't like this one, if you want to go to first page by setting page as 1, all we need to do is just set this 1 index parameters to true. Right here, 1 indexed parameters to true, like this. And for the others, like this default page size or max page size, we can override the defaults. Let's say we want default page size to be just 10. Default page size, not the Spring Data REST default page, but this one, the Spring Data Web Pageable default page size, and here it is saying the default is 20, so we are setting it to, let's say, 10. And in Postman, if we just remove these parameters and send our request, it is going to be returning back the response with the defaults. So the page will be first page, and the page size will be the one we set in the properties. So it's going to be returning 10 users back. So let's check the response. And here we have 10 users right here. And it's saying the total pages is 3 because we have 30 users. But this properties is globally applied. So if we have different controllers having this Pageable, those page size would be also having the default size as 10. But we can also override those defaults for individually any endpoint. Let's say we have another get mapping right here, and let's say this one is for, let's say, ordered users. Let's say get ordered users. In this one, we are not going to provide any parameter in any request parameter, but we want the users to be sorted based on the ID in descending direction, and we also want the page size to be like, let's say, 5. And we do that by adding another annotation right before this Pageable, which is Pageable default, and it has the options of, let's say, the first one is the sort, and we want the users to be sorted based on the ID. And the other one is the direction, and we want the direction to be in descending, and also we want size to be 5. So that's how we can override the defaults right at this controller method level. So saving this one and going to Postman again. This time I'm going to send a request to ordered users, and here we are receiving the content ordered based on the ID in descending, and we are receiving only 5 users, and here it is saying there are 6 pages, and we haven't provided any parameter. But of course we can change the page size like this one. Let's say we want 30 users, and here it is returning all the users back. That's all for the pagination. Thanks for watching. Hope to see you in the next tutorials.